Hey everybody, I'm Brandon Graisley. I'm a high school computer science teacher. I'm going to show you how to read and write text files using Java. And we're going to start by I've got a JFrame, new project here with a JFrame, and I'm going to put in some components here. So I've got a button and a text area and another button, and I'm also going to put in a label in just a minute. So let's go down here with the label. Well, things are a little jumpy on me right now. Okay, so let's just put this here. The label is going to be for messages, messages for the user. Don't need any text in there just yet. But let me just rename that. Message label. This button here is going to be to open or read a file, so I'm going to call that the read button. This button here is going to be to write a file, so write button. And then inside this scroll pane, I've got a text area, and nothing special here. I'm just going to call it text area to refer to it, and I won't need to refer directly to the scroll pane. I'm going to leave it like that. So let me just resize things a little bit here. So read a file. Maybe I'll say it like this. Write to file. The little dots, the ellipses, indicate that that's going to open up a dialog for you to make a choice. So if you don't put that there, it's just a little interface thing. Put the dots there if there's going to be another screen that pops up for the user. So again, this is sort of invisible here right now. Maybe we'll color that. We'll change the background color to, I don't know, maybe a little bit darker gray. And you'll notice it didn't show up there. That's because by default they're not opaque. Let me just find that setting. Here it is. There we go. So now we've got a kind of a gray message label there. All right, so far we've got a user interface, nothing much going on here. I'm going to add an event for this, an action performed event on a button. So when the button is clicked or tapped or selected or whatever, that's going to execute. Here's where the code will be. Let me just go back here. You can do the same thing by double clicking on a button, and that will also make the same kind of action performed method. Okay, so here's what we want to have happen. When the read button, let me just put in some sort of comments here for pseudocode. When the read button is clicked, we want to let the user choose a file. We want to open the file, read the contents, and put the contents in the text area. And then at the end of that, we're going to close the file. Okay, so those are all the steps. And we're going to do the same kind of pseudocode writing for the write button. So when the write button is clicked, we're going to dump whatever is currently in the text area into the file. So let the user choose a file. Once again, could be a different file. We're going to open the file. We're going to write the contents of the text area to the file. And then we will close the file. And that's all. Okay, and along with that, if there is a problem along the way, we're going to use that message label to tell the user that there was an issue. Okay, so those are the steps that we're going to follow. Now, there's a bunch of stuff that we're going to need to import to make this happen. I'm going to do a couple of imports right now. So one of them is we're going to need java.io.file. So file is a pointer to a file. That's how we're going to aim at a file in order to read or write. That's the structure that we use. Now, by itself, though, file doesn't let you read or write stuff. You need another structure to do that. And so we're going to import java.io.bufferedReader is a good one for reading. It lets you read in like one line at a time, for example. There are lots of other types of readers, like to read a stream and so on. I'm just going to show you buffered reader because it's pretty easy. But buffered reader can't take a file directly as a parameter, so we actually need a file reader as well. So we're going to need those three in order to be able to read files. In order to write files, we only need to add one more. We're going to import java.io.printWriter is the one I'm going to show you today. So it lets you write out, say, entire strings at a time, which we'll be able to do. We're going to have like one command that will write out everything into our file. Okay, so we're going to start with just that, and I'm going to show you a couple more things as we go here. Actually, you know what? I'm going to add one more thing right now. The user is going to have to be able to choose a file. So we're going to import it's javax.swing.jFileChooser. So this is a Swing component. It's a user interface component that will pop up when we need to let them choose a file to save or choose a file to open. Okay, so I'm going to actually declare those choosers right now. So we're going to have an open file chooser, and we're also going to have a what will I call it? Save file chooser. Okay, so the reason we're declaring them now is because as the program is run a few times, they may click the read from file, I should say, read from file button a few times. And so there's no need to make a new fresh dialog box every time. And also this way, when they click and go pick a file and then they click again, it'll be in the same folder or directory, which will make it a little faster for them. Okay, so we've got our file choosers. Maybe I'll go ahead right now and initialize those things. So we initialize all our other components. NetBeans has done that for us. And let's make our choosers. So open the open file chooser. To make a new chooser, it's just like this. That's all it is. There's one more thing we can do. If we want to set the, let me use the autocomplete here, set file filter, and this is a little bit complicated. So it's a new file name extension filter. Like if you only wanted to make let it use text files, which is what I'm going to show you. And you would put in, like this is what it shows up in for the file types that are allowed. And then what do we put here? That's just txt, I think. I don't think you put a dot. So I'll need to import that. So have I got that right? I think I have. Okay, so we have a file filter. It's a file name extension filter, text files. If I have that wrong, I'm sure it'll warn me along the way here, but I'm pretty sure that's right. Okay, so that's optional, that part. If you don't want to restrict it to text files, they can still go and open a different type of file, but this is the default that will show up. Okay, so same thing for the save file chooser. You'll notice that these are identical, like there's no difference between a open chooser and a save chooser. The difference comes in how you use them a little later. So I'm just going to copy and paste this stuff. When you use a chooser, you say whether you're trying to open or to save. In fact, we could have used a single chooser, but when we open files, it's interface-wise, it's nice if you leave the opening one pointing in a certain folder and the saving one might point elsewhere, and you sort of obey that. You may have noticed in some programs you've used that if you open from one folder and then you save somewhere else, when you go to open again, it's in the save folder, pointing to the save folder, and that's not always what you're looking for. It's kind of not nice. So trying to be, thoughtful about what the user is going to experience. Okay, so let's go on to the read method. So we're going to let the user choose a file. So there's a few steps here to do this. When you go to choose a file, there's when the file chooser opens, it's going to return a value depending on whether the user sort of successfully chose a file. So we're going to have to capture that value. We're going to call it return value, and it's going to be open file chooser dot, and this is the part that depends on what you're trying to do. In this case, it's show open dialog. So show open dialog right there means that we are going to be, it'll pop up a dialog box that says, which file would you like to open as opposed to which file would you like to save, and that's the difference between how you use an open chooser and a saving chooser. So this is going to get a number, and we'll also modify the open file chooser at the same time. So the open file chooser will sort of remember what you picked. And now we're going to have to do a try. So we're going to use a try block, which means we're going to attempt to do something like open the file and so on. So here's how it's going to work. We're going to try to open the input file. So I'll call it file input file equals open file chooser dot get selected file. You don't have to save this in a variable, but it's kind of nice to. What's my error that I'm getting? Oh, just that I don't have a catch yet. Okay, maybe we'll put the catch in. You can get an IO exception, input-output exception, which we'll handle shortly. But for now, we'll just type that in there so that it lets us. Okay, so far we've just tried to get the file name. We're good. We're good so far. Okay, so now let's, we've got an input file pointer. So that is pointing at the correct file name that was chosen. And now we're going to make a file reader. We'll call it input reader. New file reader from that file, input file. So a little bit of a stringing together of stuff here to make this work. And then buffered reader. We need this is the 3 steps we needed to do a buffered reader. You can get this all in one line instead of saving them all as variables. But you know, maybe that's not such a great idea. So I'm trying to make it as clear as I can for you. So we're going to make a new buffered reader, and as input, it's going to, as a parameter, it's going to take the input reader. Whew, okay. Not sure about my imports there. I had to redo all those. Okay, they're okay. Let me scroll back here. Apologize for the fast scrolls. Okay, here's our read button action perform method. So we grab the file name from the chooser. We turn it into an input reader, and then we turn that into a buffered reader. And you know what? I realized I forgot one thing. This return value, we need to check to see whether or not it was a successful approved file. So here's how we do that. I'm going to wrap this whole thing up in an if. If the return value is equal to, well, if it was like the approval value. So there's a special constant in the jFileChooser class called, here, I'll just show you, approve option. So if we got an approve option, then we want to go ahead and run the try block. So I'm just going to click here to show you if the user chose something successfully, then we're going to try to go ahead and open it. Otherwise, we're going to have an else down here. We're going to do some other stuff. So we'll get to that in a second. Okay, so backtracking just a little bit, we're going to try to open the file here. It's all ready to go. And then we're going to start reading the contents. Now, the way this is going to work, we're going to have a string. We're going to call it line. And that string, we're going to read one line at a time using our buffered reader. So we begin by trying to read the first line. And we do that using the read line method. So that's going to take the first line and stick it in the line string and save it there. Now, the thing that happens here is when it reads a line, if you're at the end of the file and you can't read a line, then you'll get null. Line will store the value null. So let me just write that down here. That's what will happen. And so we're going to kind of continue until we get null as being stored in the line variable. So, okay, let's clear the text area. And now we're going to make a little while loop. While the value of line is not null, that is, we're not at the end of the file yet, we're going to do text area dot append. We're going to stick in that line, and I'm also going to put in a new line character, because one of the things that when you read a line using the read line method of a buffered reader, it does not, it gets to the end of the line, but it doesn't store the new line character in there. There's also a read method. There's a whole bunch of different read methods, so you can also read one character at a time, for example. We're just going to do it line at a time. So we're going to read a line here. As long as it's a good thing, we're going to stick it on the end of what we already have in the text area. Then we need to read another line, save it in the line variable, and then continue the loop and check and see if we're okay. So let's do that. Line equals input br.readLine. Okay, so we've read another line. The while loop will come back here. If the line is null, this will stop and move down to this part. We're at the end of the file. Otherwise, it's going to append whatever text we read and try again. Continue, continue, continue until the file is closed. Or sorry, until the file is finished. So this here, this little comment that I had, put the file contents in the text area, we're actually doing that all along here. So I'm going to get rid of that comment. We don't need it. We do need to close the file though. Well, we don't need to close the file itself. We need to actually close the file readers. The file, it's just a pointer. It's not open or closed or anything. But we do need to close the readers. So I'm going to do that by closing the input buffered reader first. You just do this method. Tell the buffer reader to close itself. And what was the other one? Input reader. That was the file reader. Close it. And that's all. It's done. And I'm going to just, one more last thing. Let's tell the user that we were successful. Because otherwise they may not notice, what if they think the file is empty because nothing showed up when there was a problem or not a problem. So I'm going to make a message method. I'm going to put that right here. File successfully read. Now you wonder why I'm making a method for this, because I'm also going to put a parameter here. So bear with me. What I want to do is this message method, I want it to know whether to put the text in a regular color or to make it like red or something for an error. So this, actually maybe I'll call this false. So we're going to have a string. This is the message itself. And this Boolean will say whether or not it's an error. So I'm just going to scooch down here and make this method right now. So private, it's a void method called message. It takes a string and it takes a Boolean, which I'm going to call is error. So if this is an error, that will be true. So here I have false because it's not an error. So let me say it like this. If is error, then we're going to use the message label.setText to message and message label.set foreground color. There it is. We're going to set it to color.red. Otherwise, not an error, everything's fine. Mess label.setText to the message. And actually, I will just copy and paste this. But I don't want to use red, I want to use just black. Okay, and let's import color. We want, I have choices. Okay, java.awt, abstract windowing toolkit. Whew, we're on fire here. Okay, let's continue. So that's my little message thing. Back up to the important stuff. We read our file reader. Sorry, we open our file reader. We read all the stuff one line at a time, and we save those things as we go into the text area. Okay, let's go down to the what if it goes wrong part. So if there is an I/O exception, an input-output exception, some problem with the file, then we want to put a message in here that says error reading file. And in this case, that's going to be true, there was an error. Similarly down here, this else corresponds to what if they did not choose a value. That's the else. They did not successfully choose a value. So we'll do message no file chosen. And that will also put in red. We really want them to notice if they didn't choose a file. Okay, so we have our reading all done now. Let me just save that before we move on to the writing part of this. Okay, so write button, action performed. Very similar beginning. We're going to have a return value for the file chooser. And in this case, it's going to be save file chooser dot show save dialog. Here it is down here. And we're going to use this as, oh, I didn't mention that before. This is the parent component. So in this case, it'll be the JFrame. So the JFrame sort of owns this dialog box. The dialog is part of, or a child of the JFrame. Okay, so they've chosen the file there, and we're gonna move on from there. If, once again, if the return value is jFileChooser dot approve option, like, yep, they did choose something successfully, then we're going to do some stuff. Let me go down here. Else we're going to write, actually we'll just copy and paste this. No file chosen. Okay, so if they did choose something though, let's try to open that file. So try. Let me move my braces down here. I'm going to put the catch in right now as well. IO exception. I always like to call it, give it a variable name by its own name. This one is going to be error writing file. Okay. So let's try to open this file. How will this work? Once again, I'm going to grab the file name, sort of, the pointer. Output file is going to be the save file chooser dot get selected file. There we are. So that's sort of a pointer to the file. Now we don't need that file writer this time because print writer is a writer. So we're going to make a print writer. Oops. Output PW for print writer equals new print writer, and it just has to take the output file name or file pointer reference as a parameter. Okay, so we've got our print writer, and this one's oops, let me back up here. This one's really straightforward to write, so it's a one-step thing. We're going to do printWriter.write, and we can give it a string as a parameter or a bunch of other things. There are a variety of things you can stick in here, but all we want to do is write out whatever is in the text area right now. Get the text from it, and that passes this through as a parameter. So what string do we want to write? The one we grabbed from the text area. And that's it. So let's close this print writer. Well, we are going to do output pw.close, but you can't do that right away. Before you do that, you have to ensure that it has finished writing everything, because these things happen very quickly. Like it could be like in the middle of writing something and then begin to close. We don't want to do that. So before that, to ensure that everything is gone along, is on its way to the file, we call the method flush. Flush doesn't let the program continue until all of the bytes have been sent off to the operating system for writing. It may close the print writer before the operating system is actually done writing, but all of the bytes are on their way, and that's the best we can do. And let's just inform the user. We're going to say file successfully written. And we have to say false in that case. I think I wrote this incorrectly down here. This should have been true for an error. True. Okay, there, that's better. Let me check up here. Yeah, I did okay. Whew, okay, so I think I've got everything correct there. Let me just think if there's anything else I need to do. I think that's it. So let's go and check it out. Let's run our program. First time I've run it here. Maybe I should have made it a little bigger since I'm showing this in a video, but okay, so read from file, write to file. I'm going to start by writing to a file. I'll put some blank lines at the end. Maybe we'll put a smiley face. Okay, I'm going to write that to a file. It should pop up and ask me where I want to save, so that's good. I'll call it test.txt. You can see the text files are by default, or you can choose all files. I'm going to hit save. Okay, there's my message, file successfully written, so that's good. Let me change something here. And let's see, when I read, I'm going to read from the file and see if I get everything back that I wanted. So test.txt, or I can select it up here. Hey, okay, there's my original text. Notice the old text was all erased. Okay, that's good. Everything's working the way we expect. And that's about it. So other than some nice, a nicer user interface, that is basically how you can read and write text files in Java. So I hope that is helpful, and thanks very much. And if you have any questions, of course, you can hit the comments down below. And for those of you that are in my computer science course, you already know how to get a hold of me. Thanks a lot.